Can a single, unfinished ship, never fully armed, never battle-tested, sink not just a fleet, but an entire military doctrine? This question, though it may sound dramatic, is not merely rhetorical. History is filled with moments when a solitary event, a single loss, or a symbol's destruction sent ripples through entire systems, forcing powers to confront uncomfortable truths. The story of the Hetman Mazepa, Ukraine's ill-fated corvette, is a modern echo of these seismic moments, a case study in how the line between hope and illusion can be as thin as the steel of a ship's hull. After the watershed year of 2014, Ukraine's navy was reduced to a memory. With its main base in Sevastopol seized and most vessels lost to the annexation of Crimea, what remained was less a fighting force than an echo of past glories, a shadow fleet, its ranks decimated and its spirit battered. The world watched as Ukraine clung to hollow symbols, searching for ways to prove its resilience. Among these symbols, none loomed larger than the incomplete corvette Hetman Mazepa. This vessel, still in its infancy, was paraded as the future, proof that naval power could be reborn and that Russian dominance in the Black Sea could be contested, even reversed. But Mazepa's saga was built as much on faith as on steel. Ukraine's leaders and Western partners poured in not just billions of dollars, but also hope, pride, and diplomatic capital. The ship became a legend before it ever left the docks, a promised flagship, a would-be hunter of Russian warships, and a testament that determination, Western technology, and Allied support could rewrite the odds. In this way, the Mazepa joined the ranks of ships like the British HMS Hood, which was once a symbol of imperial might, or the Russian battleship Potemkin, which sparked revolutions. These vessels, like the Mazepa, carried more than weapons. They carried the weight of national aspirations. Then, before Mazepa could sail, Russia struck. A hypersonic Zircon missile obliterated the corvette in Odessa. It was not just an attack on a ship, but a direct assault on a narrative. The explosion sent shockwaves far beyond the Black Sea, exposing the harsh reality. Even cutting-edge defenses, international alliances, and the best-funded ambitions can be shattered in a moment. The destruction of the Mazepa was a reminder that, in war, reality always trumps myth. The stakes could not be higher. This is about whether the grand stories nations tell about their strength are true, about whether billions in defense spending actually translate to real power, and about whether reputations built on untested promises can survive a single, spectacular failure. If one unfinished ship can reveal the weaknesses of Western technology and disrupt global strategies, what other illusions are just as brittle? Consider the fate of the French fleet at Mers el-Kébir in 1940, where an entire doctrine of deterrence was obliterated in a single afternoon by British guns, or the loss of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, which forced America to rethink its Pacific strategy. The destruction of a symbol can shatter more than steel. It can crack the very foundations of belief. Let us unravel how a ship that never sailed became the epicenter of a global shockwave, one that still reverberates through the halls of power. To understand how this myth was built, we have to go back to the moment Ukraine lost its navy, and what it tried to salvage from the wreckage. The seeds of Mazepa's legend were sown in defeat. In the wake of losing Sevastopol, Ukraine's main naval base, and nearly every combat-ready ship in 2014, the Ukrainian navy seemed to vanish in a single stroke. What lingered was not a fleet, but a memory. A battered institution propped up by headlines and hope, not by warships or steel. Instead of restoring true naval strength, leaders in Kyiv crafted a spectacle. Ceremonies replaced shipbuilding. News cameras and speeches filled the void left by vanished hulls and lost sailors. The centerpiece of this pageant was the corvette Hetman Mazepa, a modern vessel not forged in Ukrainian yards but ordered from Turkish builders, a quiet admission that the country's own shipyards lay silent. This was not the first time in history a nation had tried to substitute performance with pageantry. During the interwar period, Italy's Regia Marina, battered by treaties and resource shortages, often staged elaborate displays of naval strength that concealed its actual weakness. Mazepa's construction stumbled through delays and controversies, each snag making the gulf between story and substance more painful. Yet, officials and Western press alike paraded the ship as the vanguard of a reborn fleet, a technological marvel poised to challenge Russian supremacy in the Black Sea. The rhetoric echoed that of the early Cold War, when the United States showcased its latest carriers and bombers as evidence of supremacy, even as the realities of maintenance and readiness lagged. But the banners fluttered over an unfinished dream. Beneath the public bravado, Hetman Mazepa was more symbol than weapon, a solitary corvette lacking the support of larger ships, air cover, or modern sensors. Naval analysts warn that, even completed, Mazepa would be perilously exposed, its combat power dwarfed by the scale of the challenge. The ship's real function was psychological, to calm the public, impress partners, and camouflage the bleakness of Ukraine's naval decline. Hope, and a whole vision of the future, became pinned to a single, incomplete hull. Hetman Mazepa was elevated into a national icon, but never truly became a fighting asset. It was a vessel for dreams, not for missiles or maneuvers. The same dynamic can be seen in the fate of the German battleship Tirpitz during the Second World War, a ship that, despite being formidable on paper, spent most of its life as a fleet in being, rarely risking open combat, and instead serving as a psychological lever until it, too, was destroyed by superior air power. But myths cannot shield against missiles. What happens when narrative collides with the hard edge of modern warfare? The answer would come in a flash of fire over the Black Sea, as Russia unveiled a weapon that shattered illusion and steel alike. The day Hetman Mazepa was struck, the myth unraveled, and so did the future it was meant to promise. Can a symbol survive when reality comes crashing in? The saga of the Hetman Mazepa was never just about steel and engines. It was about hope, illusion, and the fragile seam between propaganda and practical power. On paper, the Mazepa was a corvette, small, lightly armed, designed for patrols close to shore. It was never meant to confront a fleet, let alone the Russian Black Sea Fleet, alone. Yet in Ukraine's official story, the Mazepa became something far greater. A future flagship, an avenger destined to hunt Russian warships and restore battered pride. But the myth was always ahead of the facts. The Mazepa, built in Turkey and towed unfinished to Odessa, was fundamentally vulnerable. Its true mission was not domination, but demonstration. For months, it sat in port, less a warship than a symbol, showcased for cameras and VIPs. It was never concealed. Ukraine possessed no supporting fleet, no naval aviation, no reliable radar network. The Mazepa was alone, blind, and exposed, unable to leave its berth without courting certain destruction. Its isolation became its defining trait. Russian commanders saw through the myth. They understood that the Mazepa's symbolic weight far exceeded its fighting ability. Each televised ceremony, each triumphant speech, only raised its propaganda value, while its combat power remained effectively nothing. Its location in Odessa was no secret. The ship was a static target, high profile, inviting, and entirely unprotected. For Moscow, the logic was simple. Destroying the Mazepa would do more than erase a hypothetical military threat. It would shatter the illusion of Ukraine's naval rebirth. The attack would serve as both a military operation and a psychological strike. One missile, one explosion, and years of narrative would vanish in a single instant. The stakes were enormous. Public trust in official statements, faith in Western-supplied air defenses, and the already fragile morale of Ukraine's sailors all hung in the balance. Behind every symbol lurks a harsher reality, and the gap between them can become lethal. The Mazepa, created for patrols and reliant on a fleet that no longer existed, was doomed the moment it became a solitary icon. Its destruction was not just likely, it was inevitable. No amount of ceremony could shield it from the truth. The lessons here echo the fate of the Austro-Hungarian battleship Szent István in the First World War, A ship sunk on its maiden voyage, its destruction broadcast in cinema newsreels, instantly undermining the morale and prestige of the entire fleet. The world was about to witness more than the end of a ship. It would see the collapse of a narrative, the rupture of an illusion, and a demonstration that, in modern war, symbols are as vulnerable as steel. But the missile that would erase the Mazepa was no ordinary weapon. Russia had chosen its moment, and its technology, with chilling precision. The debut of the Zircon missile was not simply a military decision, but a strategic message sent to the world. In under 10 minutes, decades of military doctrine were erased. The strike on Hetman Mazepa was more than a missile attack. It was a perfectly choreographed display, the culmination of Russia's deep intelligence web. Every inch of the port was traced by satellites. Surveillance planes prowled overhead. Human agents confirmed the ship's position and vulnerabilities, pinpointing the exact moment for maximum devastation. This level of preparation recalls the Allied dambusters' raids in the Second World War, where months of intelligence and innovation converged in a single decisive strike. Armed with this detail, Russia unleashed its newest weapon, the hypersonic Zircon missile. Physics itself became a weapon. Traveling at speeds exceeding 8 times the speed of sound, the Zircon allowed no opportunity for defense. At high altitude, it soared above the thickest air, then dove toward its mark, shrouded in plasma, nearly invisible to Western radars. The missile's erratic maneuvers made it a phantom to defenders. Unlike slower cruise missiles, the Zircon could shift direction in the blink of an eye, rendering all programmed defenses useless. As it neared its target, every billion-dollar system, Ukraine's local radars, imported Western shields, even the celebrated American Patriot batteries, remained silent. No warnings, no counterstrikes, only a searing flash above the port. This moment evoked memories of the sinking of the HMS Sheffield during the Falklands War, when an Exocet missile defeated British defenses and changed naval tactics overnight. In that instant, the myth of Western air defense superiority shattered. For years, these systems had been the pride of NATO, showcased in endless footage and confident briefings. But when confronted by Russian speed and innovation, they failed. Billions in investment, generations of expertise, rendered obsolete by a weapon that gave no warning and allowed no escape. The shock was comparable to the first time tanks appeared on the battlefield in the First World War, or when jet aircraft made propeller fighters obsolete in the Second. Within minutes, evidence began to circulate, but Russia held the narrative tight. Every official statement was disciplined. The Ministry of Defense released only what it chose: stark images of wreckage, confirmation of the kill, and a clipped message of success. Meanwhile, Ukraine's response fractured: initial denial, then frantic attempts to downplay the loss. This information vacuum allowed speculation and doubt to thrive, further undermining confidence in official sources. This was not a skirmish lost in the fog of war. The world watched as the strike became a demonstration, a stark lesson for navies everywhere. No vessel, however modern or shielded by Western technology, now seemed beyond reach. The illusion of safety was gone, replaced by a single urgent question: how can navies defend against a threat they cannot even see? This question had previously been asked after the sinking of the Israeli destroyer Eilat by Styx missiles in 1967, a moment that signaled the dawn of the missile age at sea. For Western leaders, the stakes turned existential. The credibility of alliances, the value of massive defense investments, the trust in technological shields, all were suddenly unsteady. What had been a showcase of military progress now looked like a fragile facade, powerless before the hypersonic storm. Yet the true consequences were strategic, not just tactical. The attack on Hetman Mazepa did not just sink a ship. It exposed the vulnerability of every navy reliant on old doctrines. The Black Sea, and the world beyond, would never view naval power the same way again. It was as if the era of battleships had ended all over again, replaced by a new paradigm in which speed, stealth, and precision outrank weight of armor or size of guns. When a symbol is reduced to ashes, What rises to take its place? The obliteration of the Hetman Mazepa was far more than a military loss. It marked the death of an idea. For years, Ukraine's so-called mosquito fleet doctrine offered hope. Nimble, modern ships would outmaneuver giants. Yet, in one blinding instant, that hope vanished. The world witnessed in real time the unraveling of Ukraine's naval ambitions. No ship, no matter how celebrated, can survive alone in waters dominated by overwhelming air and missile supremacy. The Hetman Mazepa had been paraded as the flagship of a new era, a symbol of resilience. But its destruction by a hypersonic zircon missile exposed the reality beneath the slogans. Propaganda could not shield steel from physics. The same lesson was learned by the Japanese at Midway, when aircraft carriers, once thought invulnerable behind their screens of escorts, fell to well-coordinated air attacks. This was a psychological tremor for Ukraine's military and its people. The dream of a reborn navy, meticulously crafted by officials and echoed by Western headlines, now lay in ruins. The blow was not just to hardware, but to the spirit. Vulnerability seeped in. The hard truth became undeniable. Optimism and foreign aid cannot conjure real strength out of thin air. It is a lesson that has repeated throughout history, from the fall of Constantinople to the Battle of Jutland. The shock did not end at Ukraine's borders. In Brussels and Washington, the implications rang out even louder. The era of the invulnerable aircraft carrier group, protected by layer upon layer of high-tech defenses, has ended. The Zircon strike was not just another missile attack. It was a warning that the world's most expensive ships, once imagined as floating fortresses, are now within reach of a new kind of threat. Hypersonic weapons have sliced naval history into two eras, before and after. Military strategists from NATO to the United States Navy must now face a grim calculation. Trillion-dollar investments in traditional surface fleets are suddenly open to doubt. The pillars of global naval doctrine, deterrence by presence, projection of power through carrier strike groups, are shaken to their foundations. Security assurances that once seemed unbreakable now tremble, replaced by uncertainty and anxiety over the future. Russia's leap in hypersonic technology has rewritten the rules. The attack in Odessa was not just about sinking a ship. It was a declaration. The side wielding the swiftest, most precise weapons holds the upper hand, not the side with the biggest fleet nor the brightest banners. For every government, every military, every citizen watching, the message is sobering. On paper, superiority means nothing if it crumbles under the latest advances in warfare. Propaganda can only conceal so much before raw physics and innovation render the verdict. This is reminiscent of the French Maginot Line, heralded as unbreakable until German tanks simply bypassed it, rendering years of planning and billions of francs irrelevant in days. So, as the tides of power shift, what does it mean for you? The stakes are no longer distant headlines, but the very credibility of the systems meant to keep the world safe. The lessons of the Mazepa reach far beyond naval yards and defense budgets. They touch on the psychology of security, the faith we place in alliances, and the assumptions that underlie our sense of safety. But in the aftermath of shock, there is always adaptation. The world's militaries are already scrambling to answer the question: what comes after the old symbols have burned? The United States Navy, for instance, has launched new programs focused on distributed lethality, spreading firepower across many small, agile vessels rather than relying solely on large capital ships. NATO has begun to invest in next-generation missile defense, including laser and railgun technologies, to try to keep pace with the hypersonic threat. Meanwhile, defense ministries worldwide are revisiting doctrines, running war games, and quietly recalibrating their expectations for future conflicts. Practical steps are emerging. Port defenses are being hardened with layered systems that combine sensors, decoys, electronic warfare, and point defense weapons. Some navies are experimenting with stealthier ship designs and unmanned platforms that can operate in high-threat environments. Others are focusing on building resilient networks so that, Even if one asset is lost, the system as a whole can adapt and fight on. There is also a renewed emphasis on intelligence sharing, real-time satellite surveillance, and rapid decision-making loops, all designed to reduce the window of vulnerability that doomed the Mazepa. Yet, adaptation is not just technological. It is also psychological and institutional. Leaders are being forced to confront the limitations of their own narratives. Military academies are updating curricula to reflect the realities of modern missile warfare, and think tanks are urging governments to cultivate a culture of strategic humility rather than complacency. Public outreach is shifting too, with officials acknowledging risks more candidly in order to rebuild public trust. The story of the Hetman Mazepa is now a cautionary tale taught not just in Ukraine, but around the world. It is discussed in naval colleges, debated in parliaments, and analyzed in classified briefings. Its lessons echo those of past shocks: the fall of Singapore, the sinking of the Bismarck, the surprise of the Yom Kippur War, each a moment when the gap between perception and reality was violently closed. In war, the loudest story seldom survives the first missile. The destruction of the Hetman Mazepa, Ukraine's prized corvette, by a single Russian Zircon missile was more than a tactical loss. It was the sudden collapse of a myth, a rupture in the narrative Ukraine and its Western backers had built for years. The Mazepa, once hailed as a symbol of naval rebirth and Western faith, was obliterated in seconds before the world's eyes. The illusion of Ukraine's maritime resurgence crumbled instantly. Western air defenses, once sold as invincible barriers, could not touch Russia's hypersonic advance. The Mazepa was revealed not as a true warship, but as a stage piece. Its destruction, a public unmasking of the fragile reality beneath official optimism. The moment recalled the collapse of the Soviet submarine K-129, which, despite secrecy and high expectations, was lost in mysterious circumstances, forcing the Soviet Navy to reevaluate its assumptions and capabilities. This moment compels us to reconsider the stories we trust. When symbols are destroyed by undeniable force, what remains is the hard truth. Technology, not wishful thinking, now dictates the battlefield. Overnight, the balance in the Black Sea shifted, and with it, global confidence in the doctrines and investments shaping military futures. The deeper danger is not just on the water, but in our minds. In a time when information is a weapon as sharp as any missile, clinging to the wrong narrative risks not only defeat, but disillusionment. Security, alliances, even reputations are now hostage to technological surprises. The fate of the Mazepa is a stark lesson. Power and progress are only real when they survive contact with reality. To grasp the future of warfare and the fate of world order, we must look beyond official pronouncements. We must ask what these breakthroughs mean for everyone living under the shadow of new weapons. Only by confronting the uncomfortable can we hope to pierce the propaganda and see the battlefield as it truly is. In the end, the lesson of the Hetman Mazepa is not simply about ships, missiles, or technology. It is about the perils of believing in symbols when the world is changed by the realities they cannot withstand. The question, then, is not whether a single unfinished ship can change the course of history. The question is whether we are willing to learn from such moments before the next missile streaks across the sky, before the next myth is shattered, and before the next doctrine is consigned to the depths.